So the ultimate checklist, that's why you're here, right? Next slide there, please, Trish. What we want to talk through today is exactly what both Jared and Marty have discussed, which is that budget piece at the end. And we'll get to that, we promise. But we want to make sure that we are going through the checklist, which is knowing your purpose. Why are we intentional about donor recognition? Okay. We want to be able to determine our giving levels. At which different levels, what does that even mean? What do the giving levels mean? Establish types of recognition. There are so many different ways to be able to say thank you and to recognize those who are supporting our missions, and then being able to dial in our budget. So you need to be able to firmly and confidently be able to check off each of these boxes in order to be able to establish how much you should be spending, what your recognition policy is, how you're recognizing, and to feel confident within the space of donor recognition. So it's not just about setting a price, right? We need to know all the different levels. We need to know all the ingredients that are going into this cake that we are making. So we're going to get started with the purpose of donor recognition, which is something that we absolutely have to know in order to build this out successfully. Donor recognition is an important aspect of any type of fundraising that we do, and it helps us to acknowledge and thank donors for their contributions to our organization or to our cause, right? Here are some of the greatest benefits of donor recognition. Number one, increased donor retention. We know that we need to be staying on top of retaining donors just as much as we're moving on to new donors, right? Donor recognition can help to build strong relationships with donors and increase their loyalty to our organization. When we acknowledge their contributions and we show our appreciation, we're encouraging donors to continue supporting our cause, which means that they are continuing to give, right? So purpose of donor recognition, increasing our donor retention. Another purpose is to enhance their engagement. Our donor recognition can help to engage our donors and makes them feel way more connected by keeping them informed of their impact and their contributions, and involving them in our missions. We can create a sense of shared purpose. And that fosters a deeper commitment to our cause, which then translates into retaining them as a donor, which is a great purpose for donor recognition. You're going to see how these all weave together, just like those ingredients in a cake, right? I guess I should maybe utilize a different vehicle of food like fajitas, perhaps, since it's Cinco de Mayo. So the next one is that we want to improve fundraising results through donor recognition. We do that by increasing our donor retention and enhancing our donor engagement. Improved fundraising results. What does that mean, Sean? It means we're raising more money. Okay. We got to spend money to raise money. So recognition is a big piece of that. It helps to attract new donors, and it increases donations from existing donors. Again, when donors are feeling appreciated and valued, they are more likely to give, to continue giving, but also recommend us to others and to give more generously in the future. Okay, so you're seeing all these different pieces coming together to increase the amount of money coming to our organizations to further our mission. That leads directly into positive public relations. Some of us are blessed with organizations that have just naturally positive interactions almost consistently. Okay, but some of us struggle within this space of having positive public relations. If we're in healthcare, for example, sometimes we tend to hear complaints more than we hear compliments. Donor recognition is a phenomenal way to raise the profile of our organizations and to demonstrate to our community transparency and accountability when it comes to philanthropy. It also helps us to build trust with the wider community. So when we're thinking about casting a large net, when people are seeing people they know giving through donor recognition, they're going to be more on board and trust you more. Okay. And then finally, personal fulfillment. Donor recognition can be personally fulfilling for not only the donor, but also for you as the staff member or the volunteer and the organization. It's a win-win-win-win. When we acknowledge their contribution, donors feel a sense of pride and accomplishment, but we also just feel really good for highlighting them. Okay. So organizations recognizing donors when they do it in a meaningful way, when we do it in a meaningful way that isn't just checking a box, we're expressing gratitude and we're celebrating their efforts and their generosity, and how they're contributing to our mission. So that's the purpose. Why are we doing this? We're raising more money. We're doing the right thing. Okay. Next slide, please, Trish. We're going to talk through lots of types of recognition. And I would argue that there are so many ways to recognize donors, but you need to be doing some of them and have a plan for a lot of them, to make sure that you aren't dropping any balls. These are some of the most well-known, and I'm betting that most of you have heard of all of these or have seen all of these or are implementing all of these. And when I get done with this particular slide, Marty is going to walk us through some very specific examples of these pieces, right? So naming opportunities. If someone's giving a really large gift, they have the opportunity to get their name on something, right? It can be a program. It could be a music therapy program. It could be a whole entire ding dang hospital, right? If they're given a boatload of money. It could be a certain room in your organization. It could be a playroom. It could be whatever it is. If they're giving at a certain level, we say thank you by allowing them to name it how they wish, right? Plaques and awards, we're all really familiar with this. You give to an organization, they give you a plaque and award dependent upon that level of giving, right? Donor walls, dynamite way to show guilt by association. You walk into an organization, you see their beautiful donor acknowledgement walls, their recognition walls. You look for your name, you look for the name of people that you know. You're surprised as to who's on that specific space. So sorry. And then you are inspired to give. Then we also have donor societies. Those donor walls are going to list our donor societies. When we go on websites, we're going to see donor societies. I'm a part of this giving club and this donor society. Public acknowledgement. Holy moly, the more we can tell the community and the public about what we are fundraising for and who is giving to us. We're talking about press releases. We're talking about pictures splashed all over social media. We're talking about being able to publicly acknowledge the generosity that comes to our organizations. Great place to do this, special events. We are not saying to host special events to do this necessarily, but utilize special events that you have to say thank you to people. We like to make it good practice that anytime you're inviting the public into your organization, whatever it is, find a donor to say thank you to and find a way to do that publicly. Take a picture, make sure everyone knows about it. Okay. I don't care what the opportunity is. If people are coming to your organization and there is an opportunity to say thank you, take it. Gift acknowledgement, we're going to talk about that later in this piece, but that is when you're getting your letters, you're getting your little tokens of appreciation. It is a way for you to mark the box that you have actually said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that leads into thank you notes and letters. That goes beyond just their recognition or their gift acknowledgement letter. This is an additional thank you. Did you know that money that you gave did this month, right? Or a letter written, signed by a physician, signed by an instructor, signed by a kid. We'll get into that later. But those are your types of recognition that are most well known that you need to be thinking about, because what is associated with a lot of these? Money. Some of these, not so much. Public acknowledgement, we can snap a picture and we can put it on social media all day long. But a lot of these need to be built out into your budget, and there are formulas to be able to do so. Okay. So now I'm going to hand it over to Marty, and she's going to walk you through some beautiful examples that we have from clients who have done a really excellent job of recognizing, and we'll get to the money in a bit.
Thank you, Shauna. So as she mentioned, snapping a picture obviously doesn't cost a whole lot, but looking at these couple photographs, look at how meaningful this must have been for the people involved. And I don't even know the exact specifics of these, but if you can see, looks like some sort of a ribbon cutting. Clearly there are multi-generations of families involved here, and that public recognition and that celebration of that. Very, very impactful, very, very important, especially for our highest level donors. But when we're able to do a large group for all donors, deeply, deeply increases engagement when we feel like we're part of the bigger family and we're really making that difference. Next slide, please. Next, we have a couple of specific Giving Club recognition items. This is definitely an important piece, as we've talked about, having that sort of token of gratitude. You will note on both of these, it has the name of the Giving Club and it has the organization that it's connected to, whether in imagery or in name. Uh, I would argue that these, while it's a token of gratitude and something that you give to those people who have given to your organization, it is a great marketing tool, right? It helps provide exposure for your program. If this is sitting on someone's desk or in someone's home and someone sees it and says, hey, what's the Cornerstone Society or what's the John R. Cook Legacy Circle? How come I don't have one of those? People start to get FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. People start to want to be a part of something. And it definitely creates that snowball effect of I'm a part of the club. And so not only do we have that gratitude expressed and feeling that ownership if I'm a part of the club, we are spreading that to others and inspiring others to want to become a part of what we're doing. So super important there. And I love these glass pieces, just unique. There's a story there, I'm sure. Thinking about your own organizations and the story and the connection is very, very powerful for these specific recognition gift items. Again, expenses involved, we know that as well. But next, we have a couple of donor walls. The first one on the left you see is a screen, easy to edit, easy to have that, scrolling through. I think this one, if you could see it, you probably can't quite tell. I think it is a touch screen, and at the bottom there are places that you can touch it. Oftentimes, it has more, I think it has more information on the organization. It obviously has donors listed there. It probably has information on the current project or campaign. Very helpful for people who are sitting in a waiting room and may just be, have nothing to do while they're waiting on a loved one. Very helpful for them to be able to gather information and see who's involved. The one on the right overlapping there, clearly that has names. I think it has some interest in, the colors and the deep sides of it. I like how they've done that. It's just a different, unique way to recognize donors. Oftentimes we've walked through the halls and seen like sort of the old plaques engraved in. This one I think just gives a little more uniqueness to it. So we wanted to share that. Again, you have to keep in mind in these type of situations, your ability to update them in a time-sensitive manner, your ability to make the changes needed. All of those things play into account in the budget. I suspect that the one on the right has a higher budget for ongoing maintenance because you're needing to, probably purchase or etch pieces, whereas the other one may be a big upfront cost for the technology, but then once you have it, then it's ongoing. So thinking about budgets in that way are some of the considerations there, of course. Next slide, please, Trish. I absolutely love the one on the left here, and I get to embarrass Jake Lyons today. He can be Mr. March for you as well. He is running in a race in this particular one. But this is the Georgia Healthy Family Alliance. They had a race and Jake happened to participate in that, and he is Mr. March there, you see, in 2020. But I love this, a calendar for your donors to set on their desk. Again, this creates that like, hey, what's this? And it tells the story. So it's a nice token of gratitude, but it's also an opportunity to showcase your organization and all of the great work that's being done. On the right, we have a couple of lapel pins. I love how they have presented this, right? You're saying thank you to someone, and it's saying in recognition for your generosity, and has a little, I can't quite see all of that because I don't have my glasses on, but you can get the idea. It's a nice note to them, thank you. And we hope that you will wear these, but I also like how they have signatures, right? The people who are involved, the leadership, have, they have taken the time to say thank you and sign their names to it. It's just a nice touch when you're presenting a recognition gift item there, for that particular giving club. Next, we have a couple of samples, both in print and social media. I just think it's great whenever you're able to highlight and showcase generosity of real people, right? Real people who are known in your community. You're able to take the time and say, this is why they chose to do this. Their faces on it, a quote from them. Those types of things are very powerful in the print realm as well as in social media. The one on the social media side there, that this particular one is a beam signing. A lot of times in construction projects, it's really common to get people to come and sign their name to it. Again, it's giving me recognition. It's deeply engaging me. I'm signing my name on a beam that's going to be there for God knows how long, right? In the middle of that building, I'm engaged now. My name is in there. It's my recognition, right? Very much in the fulfillment realm, right? Just thinking of all the components, and that's something that doesn't cost a whole lot, and you can put on social media, and you can get that exposure as well as thank everyone. So great example there. I think we have a couple more. These are placards associated with naming of spaces, whether it's a break room, the reflection area, the Ambassador Plaza. Just some examples of how people have chosen to recognize this particular one on the left, having a gift from in honor of. It's nice to be able to make it meaningful, right? Have more than one name when you're making that large of a naming gift. Making it meaningful. And so there are people who are going to recognize those names as long as that's there. And that also helps provide credibility, inspiration for future gifts, right? That Ambassador Plaza, that is the employees of that particular organization. Very great for them to have that ownership and feel like they helped make that happen. And then that other one, again, generously donated by all the family listed there. Great when you can bring in that multi-generational recognition. Next slide, please. These are a couple of recognition event invitations. The one on the left was for all the signature level donors. Actually, just very recently, last month, Good News Clinics had a really special, meaningful, seasonal right before their groundbreaking of their project, recognition for all the donors who had contributed at the signature gift level, and they had a nice gathering for that. Love the one on the right, the 1951 Club. I'm a big proponent of annual gift celebrations having some sort of a theme to them. So this particular theme, this Western theme, get people excited, get them to dress up, come out, have a good time, and learn a little bit about what the impact their gift is making on the community. So a couple of sample invitations for those events. And then I believe there's one more. Great use of photo and video saying thank you. Love that. I'm not sure who is behind that mask in that one with that dog there. Maybe someone on this call, but we'll leave that alone. But look at the dog, so cute. But I love, thank you from the team. And then that video, whenever you can have a video, if you're doing an electronic thank you, again, great way to bring people in. We know that facts tell, stories tell. If you've got a story about a real person, you're saying thank you. Oh, you're going to grab my heartstrings and make me want to do more of that, right? So hopefully that inspired you all to think a little bit about the creative ways that you can do your recognition. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jake to give you some more specifics on the budgeting front.
All right. Thank you so much, Marty. Now that we've kind of seen the examples, we want to give you some hard numbers because when you're looking at budgeting, you do want to know some of the data and some of the specifics. If there's any other examples, we can get to those at the end. I want to make sure we have enough time to actually walk through the science part of this. So we're going to go by giving level so we can actually kind of break down because it's not a flat percentage of what you raise. It's not a flat percentage of your revenue. It's a little bit more to do with niched by giving type and giving size. These are pretty good industry standards and where we try to recommend for our client base to do this because we found that there's a ceiling to how much you can spend and it matters. It kind of falls off. Like if you spend nothing, we don't want to spend nothing on recognition. There's a lot of reasons as we outlined that recognition is critical. But as you spend more and more and more, that curve starts to flatten and it's not a perfectly inverse. The more you spend, the better it is. So this is kind of at that point where it starts to tip. for each of these levels. And that is why we try to dial in for each of these percentages. So first, signature giving level. Now we define this as anything over $50,000. Some organizations go a little lower than that. Major gifts is an interchangeable term, but anything that is signage or name on a building, name on a wing, name on a program type thing. The standard for the industry is about 2% for the signage, but more important than the spending, say if it's $1 million gift, we don't automatically have to spend $20,000 on it. It's more that it's a personal touch and it's personalized for that donor. But you can kind of look at this and say, this is about what we want to do. For plan giving, we don't want to look at a percentage of that because we don't know what those dollar amounts might be. So for plan giving, we of course want to recognize people when they let us know that we're in their estate. We tend not to ask for the amount or for a copy of the will or anything like that. Just kind of get surprised when that amount comes. Some people will disclose that, but we don't ask for it. So just a basic donor wall and listings in your website, social media, collateral, doesn't cost much other than the donor wall construction itself, and then having a very small private intimate event. We try to stay outside of that, not too much for planned gifts. So planned gifts not having a perfect dollar amount, but we just really want to focus on these two things and say, here's where we want to go. But we get the question for the signage and recognition for a physical space all the time. Try to keep it around or under 2% if you can. For business and special gifts, again, special gifts being in that $10,000 to $50,000 range, business gifts being exactly what it sounds like, gifts from corporations, foundations. We try to also stay 2% of the gift for official recognition. That's kind of all included. If you're not looking at specific signage, we want to keep under that threshold. So we're looking at our kind of average rolling revenue for that, for those specific categories. And instead of saying, oh, we're going to have all of our recognition at 2%, we say, what's 2% of our business giving? Can we take 2% of that bucket and apply it towards that? What's 2% of our $10,000 to $50,000 range? Let's take 2% of that bucket. So what we want to try to change the way you're thinking about this, if we can, is instead of saying, this is how much revenue I have, giant bucket of all the things that I've raised from all the different areas, and then here's the big percentage of what I'm allowed to spend, and I kind of just divvy it up how I feel. We try to say, can we parse that out even one layer further and divide our types of giving, size of gifts into different buckets, and then take percentages of those buckets so that it's proportional. So that's our best recommendation, to try to do that around that 2% is pretty standard. For annual and employee, this is a little bit of an exception because these tend to be smaller gifts. We recognize most of these are going to be under $1,000. They're called annual because annual basis, that totally makes sense. But these are the smaller end gifts that you can't spend multiple thousands of dollars or even $100 because that's most of the gift. And the 2% rule tends to be a lot lower. So oftentimes we try to get a larger amount for the first gift to encourage people to come back and give again. It is perfectly appropriate for the first time that someone ever donates to the organization to have a 10 to 20% of that gift in that range. So to spend $10 or $20 in total, not on a single recognition item, but in total between the events and if there's a specific item and your time to list it on all the different places and recognition, well, all the stuff that you might do in some combination to try to be in that range. And then it should taper way down after that, because we know that we have to spend more to capture new donors, just like you have to spend more to capture new leads or anything else. And then it can taper off from there. But you can start in that 10 to 20% range and then back it off from there. One thing to note, after the first gift, their costs move to giving clubs recognition. So we know that if we're pushing these people into giving clubs, we have a recognition policy in place that actually outlines what they get if they give at 100, at 1,000, at 10,000, all the way up. So it's, instead of guessing case by case, gift by gift, we kind of just have a policy in place, and it's an easy table that we can have in an Excel document, and it just kind of outlines exactly what we do. So we can determine these amounts in advance and then kind of back into it from there as we actually have the gifts come through the door. So in kind of dividing up your total annual budget, you're saying that's great. I still need to know what to put in my budget. Our fiscal year is coming up in May, our fiscal year is coming up in June. What exactly should I be looking at for this? Here's an example of how we walk through this with our clients. So want to start with annual costs of thank you cards, because we know we have those, but the physical card stock goes a long way. Want to look at your wall display. You want to look at your newsletter. Now, one thing about both of those is that it might be ongoing. You might spend a little bit to create a donor wall, but a lot of those have those like plastic sheets that are interchangeable, and they're updated quarterly, or they're updated once a year. They're updated monthly sometimes. And there will be costs involved in getting those things printed. because you want to be able to update it at some interval so that people can see their name. They don't want to give a gift and wait 3 years to have the name up on the wall, especially if they meet those giving clubs. So look at those costs and say, how many of these are we printing a year? About what is it going to cost us? For our email newsletter, is that lumped into our other expenses, or are we going to have to get a new MailChimp account to do this? How much time are we sinking into that? We also want to look at all of our events and say, we don't love fundraising events. It's over, 50 cents to raise $1 on average. It's not great returns. And we at Pride try to steer you away from that. But certainly we love recognition and even stewardship cultivation events because it's a lot easier to have a small intimate gathering where you don't have to get sponsorships and auction items and put on a golf tournament. It's much more difficult and time consuming for your staff team to do that. A lot easier to have a small gathering with like wine and small hors d'oeuvres, and you have someone speak and everyone just gets to kind of gather and chat. Might even be able to get the venue for free in that case. So there's a lot of easier things you can do, but do look at those. What are my calendar events for the year? How much do they cost on average? And go through that. If you have video messages that you're creating also, again, great way to connect now. They're much, much easier to make, but we want to look and kind of lump that in and then just kind of add that up for your annual budget. Then we say to kind of retroactively look and make sure that that lines up with what your total spending is in that 2% in the early on annual gift space. And it gives you a pretty good idea of what your campaign budget can be for that. All right. Kind of dive into those quickly one at a time here. Thank you cards, you really shouldn't be spending $1 to $2 more per card. If you feel like you're spending more, you need to spend more, your cards might be too fancy. The fanciness of the card does not necessarily dictate how thankful you are. A lot better than buying a fancy card is taking 2 additional minutes and writing 3 very personalized sentences. If I got a blank card that's just white in a blank envelope, but it has a nice long paragraph written note, that is tremendously more meaningful than if I get this big fancy card with all the shiny Hallmark whatever, and it's just signed with just a name. That's worth way less to me. It costs $7, whereas I could spend less than $1 on a single card. Sending a handwritten note, obviously, to each donor. If you can't do every donor, start with your biggest ones, work your way down. Just a wonderful way to show impact. And a lot of donors will try out organizations this way. They'll give 3 or 4 gifts, see how they respond, and they'll end up giving more year in to the ones who they felt needed it the most by demonstrating how thankful they were. So you want to just look at your number of donors and say, we have about this many new donors per year. We're going to spend $1.50 on average per card. And that's what we put in our budget. A lot of this is kind of nitty gritty. Why would I need to know this? We know that many of you, and if you're watching the replay of this and have more questions, feel free to message us. But many of you have to submit your budget in advance. And it's like, well, I'll spend what I spend on thank you cards. It's like, nope, doesn't work that way. I've got my boss or my finance director, or whomever says that I have to submit this in advance. So this gives you just a way to kind of back into it and say, it's not going to be exact, but I can definitely give you a pretty safe ceiling doing this. Next. The donor wall recognition. We know that this is in the $500 to $20,000 range. If you need recommendations on companies who do this well and in an inexpensive way for nonprofits, we certainly have those. So feel free to ask if you're looking for that. But it depends on the type of display. Is it custom? Is it custom to your organization? Is it a lot of 3D stuff? Is it a singular wall? How big is the wall? There's so many things. We've seen them as low and as simple as $500, and we've seen them as elaborate and beautiful and art themed. It looks like an art exhibit sometimes for, in the $20,000 range. Not unusual to do in a large space of a multi-million-dollar building. What you want to do is think ahead a little bit and set up a dedicated space either in your office or in the new facility so that when people walk in, it's very visible. Less important, again, is the fanciness of it. More important is the visibility. Can I find my name quickly? And can we rotate names in and out as we get new ones? You might have a donor wall in your organization. You go, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. It was from our 2014 campaign. We haven't updated it since, but look how good it looks. And you're recognizing people who have not given to you in years, and you're not recognizing people who've given to you this year, which we know is a problem. So we know have the one-time setup costs, which a lot of times these firms that do this can talk you through, and then they'll give you hey, here's what it costs to update it with new names every quarter. Here's the ceiling in terms of how many names you can fit on here. So if your annual giving list gets too long, here's what we're going to do with that. So you can look at those, but you'll get a pretty specific quote about your donor wall, especially if you're in campaign mode and you've not done one. You will probably need one of these. Next. Donor appreciation events. Again, we want to be that under $30 a person. You can get away with it for 10 if you're only doing like just wine, or like you have like light beverages that you bring. You can really get this as low as you possibly. It doesn't have to be big fancy wedding status, but depending on the size, sometimes it's actually easier to have a small intimate gathering with your top donors and not have anything fancy. And it's more about just gathering and getting together. We try to recommend at least one yearly event. We say in person or virtual because we've had to switch to virtual, but in person if you can, to thank your donors, but more importantly, provide updates on what's going on, saying, here's how we're spending your money. Here's where we are so far in our campaign. And then the last thing, which is so critically important, we don't talk about it much, is to give them an opportunity to connect with each other. That's really the more important thing. This is why like a golf tournament is difficult, because you kind of go in teams and you have your groups of 4 to 6 and they're going, but they're all kind of spread out the whole time, as opposed to we're all in one space together. We're gathering, we're chatting. When people give, it's not because they feel like they have too much money. They're giving because they want to be a part of what you're doing. They respect and love and are excited about your mission. And giving them an opportunity to connect with other people who are excited about your mission is one of the most special things we can give them. And it doesn't cost that much. Again, one per year for everybody, or maybe one per year for everyone above the $10,000 level. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but you just look at your number of attendees and say, we have about this many new donors per year. We're going to have something in this range because we're going to keep it very simple and very inexpensive. I don't want to say cheap because we don't want it to feel cheap. We want it to feel inexpensive because they also will appreciate the fact that you're not spending their donation on a big party. They will understand that. Say, well, these are high rolling people. These are 6-figure donors. They're used to these big extravagant parties. And our response to that is yes, but like if we're showing them that we're spending 98% of their gift on the project, they might appreciate that a lot more. And you can certainly have that conversation with them. So events next. Personalized video messages. These tend to be free. Again, you can outsource some of the creation, but one of the easiest thing to do is just to take a selfie video with your smartphone and then just text it to someone. Or send it to them in an email. Almost all of us have front-facing cameras on these, and a personalized video message goes a really long way. It does cost you staff time, obviously, but to feature your staff or the people who've received care or services because of the gift that they made, or volunteers who are expressing gratitude of thank you so much for your gift because we're now able to do this, showcasing the impact, especially if it's personalized. You don't have to have some big video agency do a $1,000 a minute deal for you when a simple selfie video is a lot better. Now, if you've never taken a selfie video, it can be awkward at first. Learning how to like talk on camera is totally different than talking in person, totally different than presenting, totally different being on Zoom. So it's a little bit weird at first, but with anything else, you just get more comfortable with it as you go. It doesn't cost you a thing, and very, very impactful, we found. Okay, a couple of things to keep in mind, and then we'll kind of wrap up and get to any questions. First, allow your volunteers to be involved if you can, to a certain point as appropriate, for choosing the recognition for their giving club. So for the group of people who's helping you pipeline for business gifts, give them a few options on what they think people would like, because what they will actually tell you is what they would like, which is totally fine, because that gives them some ownership and agency. So you don't want to say, hey, what do we want to do for recognition? Because then the whole meeting you're talking about that instead of prospects. But you do want to say, here's some of the options that we were thinking about as a staff. Which of these 3 do you feel are going to be best and most appropriate? What will people appreciate the most? That way they still feel like they're picking something, and they are. And also you're not spending a ton of time digging into this or that versus actually talking about raising money. The next thing is you can never over-recognize, overthink, or overemphasize how thankful you are. You can't overspend, but if you can talk about the time invested in this versus the time invested in finding new donors, you'll find that I think it's on average like 5 to 7 times more expensive to try to capture someone new than it is just to keep your existing people happy. So even if your time is 50-50 split, cultivation versus stewardship, totally fine. Saying I'm spending a lot of time just going back to the people who have already pledged, and doesn't that feel wasteful? I got to go find out new people. We got a campaign to run. It's like, I promise you in the long run, it's going to be a lot less expensive to keep those people informed and happy. And the best way to do that is just send out information and say thank you all the time. Not any more complicated than that. If your budgets do prove to be continually problematic, we've found excellent ways to get creative. One of which being for our clients, especially if you're a client of Pride, we have all of the recognition pieces and items and letters and invitations and brochures and everything that any of our clients have ever made. If it exists, just ask us because we probably have 7 of it. So you can save yourself a lot of time just by going through us and getting those things done and not having to reinvent the wheel, or just to get ideas. say, hey, I want recognition for this, this, and this. What are pieces for people who've given in the $10,000 to $25,000 range? And we shared a few of them today, but we have a lot more where that came from. And even if you're not using the exact piece, you can get some really fun ideas just from what other organizations have done over the years. All right. And keys to success here. Allow volunteers to have buy-in for the giving clubs. Again, let them have a little bit of say in what goes on, but guide them appropriately. Again, we don't want to talk just about recognition. Have policy in place. Again, before you start your campaign, before you start going, make sure you have something in writing that says at this level they get this, at this level they get this. We can certainly help with that in terms of what is appropriate. If you can, have the organization pay for the portions as a PR marketing effort instead of out of your budget, saying, hey, we know that this is going to draw more people to the program. If we cannot pull it out of the fundraising dollars, it helps to be able to talk to our donors and say 100% of this gift goes to X, Y, and Z. Again, why it's great if your salary is paid out of the organization budget, not out of the fundraising budget. Not always perfectly, we can't always do that, but we try to do that so we can tout all the dollars get allocated where the donor allocates them. And then lastly, be prepared to make a case for recognition. Because not everyone is going to be on board right away. You can show them this recording if you want, but just make sure that, hey, this is an investment for us. And we do want to thank our donors, but the real reason we're doing recognition is to draw attention to the program and increase our fundraising revenue. All right. With that, we're a little over time here, so I'll take any questions quickly. But if not, I'll turn it back over to Marty to get us out of here.
Jake, just something real quick and a kind of a specific thing. Because a lot of times when you're looking at those lobby displays and wall displays within the facility, it can get expensive, obviously, when you talk about $20,000, sometimes even more. Many times kind of a workaround on that can be that can be considered a capital expense and can be applied to the organization's capital budget, which not always, but most of the time is a little easier to get through than out of your operating budget. So just kind of, you mentioned the possibility as far as looking at, any PR or marketing budgeting dollars that are available. Look also at capital budgets, because that's a different budget in most institutions and most organizations than the operating budget. So that's kind of another workaround if you've got budget considerations, which most of us do.
Absolutely. Great insight, great point. With that, I will turn it back to Marty for any wrap up, and we will go from there.
Thank you so much. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. If you are not already following us on LinkedIn, you should be. Take a look at our LinkedIn page. We've got lots of great content we're putting out. There's a QR code in the link there. Definitely follow us.